So Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in the music industry.
Yes, Chris. I started with NIJO.
And that's the National Youth Jazz Orchestra.
That's correct,
Yeah.
yes. And that really was my college. I started with them when I was 11 years old, and I stayed with them till I was 21, although I turned professional when I was 16.
Right.
And many of the players in NIJO were professional players. There weren't really many, well, there was only one college in the country specialising in jazz, which was Leeds College of Music. But I grew up in London, everything was there. I was already working when I was 16, so that, again, my college was in London.
Right.
I then graduated from that, doing functions, that type of work. I started doing more shows, West End shows, so I did like Starlight Express, 42nd Street, those type of shows.
Yeah.
And then that developed into some studio work, more studio work, working with the BBC big band, concert big band. Yeah, working with artists such as Barbra Streisand, Cross Section, George Michael.
Yeah.
I did quite a lot with John Dankworth. I even did one concert with Elvin Jones. Right. It was a last minute thing, called up at the last minute. I wish it could have been more than that one concert.
Yeah.
And then I had 10 years out for various reasons, and then came back to playing, joined the Sid Lawrence Orchestra, travelled around playing, and now I've sort of stopped doing that. I'm teaching. Yeah. I'm really enjoying the teaching. It's such a positive thing to be able to pass on experience that I've gained in the music business, and hopefully make students' path in the business easier.
Yeah. And as a jazz musician, I think the skill of improvising in jazz, which is kind of standard for jazz musicians, can be a little bit of a mystery for people who aren't trained or aren't experienced in jazz music. So would you like to tell us a little bit about how you approach improvising and how you approach teaching others to improvise?
Yes. For me, jazz has become too academic. It's too much theory and not enough heart and ears and hearing what you're playing. Yeah. So I've really gone backwards in that whole process. So if a student comes to me, a classical student, say, or a new beginner in jazz, I will start them on two elements. One is the rhythmic side of playing, and one is the harmonic side of playing. The rhythmic side of playing is as simple as playing jazz tunes, but phrasing them correctly, playing them along with recordings of jazz tunes. Then you extend that to playing excerpts of, say, big band parts, and learning that phrasing, and learning the phrases and how phrases are put together. From that, you start learning transcriptions, playing, transcribing music. Students then have a problem in writing down the rhythmic side of the transcriptions. It's like, how do I write this down? And they find the first beat, all right, that's the first beat of the bar, but they can't, how's that go? Yeah. So in the same way as we read a word, say adventure, we don't read the letters, we just see the word.
Yeah.
You do the same with music. Now drummers have been doing this forever, and a lot of and top players do it without thinking about it. That transfers itself into how do you play jazz phrases? How do you teach? Well, you've been learning tunes, you've been learning patterns, you're learning these phrases, so that already comes into the rhythmic side of that. Yeah. Then we get to the harmonic side. The first thing that everyone, and they still teach, is the chord tones. So you go through a sequence playing the chord tones, and preferably, you know, playing them sort of in a tune rather than just arpeggios going up and down. And you play them in a nice tune, and you get that. And that's simply a case of putting on an app or something, or a metronome, and just doing it every day. Right. Spend 5-10 minutes. You don't have to spend long before you start recognizing the things, and it's there. Then what is done now, more than anything, is people are given scales.
Right.
And scales coming out the woodwork. They're just this scale, that scale, everything. And what people do is they just play these scales. And I've had students come into me and they're playing something. It just doesn't sound right. In fact, it sounds horrible. I say, are you hearing what you play? Are you listening to that? Well, no, I'm playing the right scale. So my approach is to say on a simple type tune, diatonically, it's in, say, the key of F. And then I get the student to look through the chords and identify notes that are non-diatonic notes.
Right.
And they're the notes that are changing. They're the notes that explain. Now, you can play in F major, and you hit that G sharp on the 4th bar, and it sounds like you know what you're doing.
So it's notes of the chords of the piece that are not in the key signature, the overall key signature.
They're important. But then that goes because you have the note before. So if a G goes to a G sharp, that G in the first place is important.
Right.
Then the G sharp, and the G sharp at some point will go back to the G. So you've got a movement there, in there. And that's nothing, that's just standard theory. But doing it this way, I get the students to hear that. I get the students so that when they play a wrong note, they, oh, and they hear that that's wrong.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. We'll get people really, truly hearing when things are right or wrong.
Yeah.
The next step is to get people to construct the scales from what they're hearing. So they play the chord tones, and then they fill in the gaps. So if you've got C, E, G, B, you could play C, D, E, F, G, A, but it might be that dictating on which chords are each side, that those notes will change. So it might be that that C major 7 actually wants to have an F sharp because the following chord hints to that, or where we're going further on. So it's a case of building the hearing. And then we, of course, look at that scale that they've come up with. And then we can go, what scale is that? What are you learning?
Yeah, so you're arriving at the same thing. You're arriving at the scales, but through teaching by hearing and listening.
Yes, so it's not theory first, it's ears first, and then you get the theory. Because for myself, and we're all different, but for myself, if I can learn something theoretically, and I've forgotten it the next day, if I learn it orally first, and then introduce the theory, well, what can I do on that? What can we do? And in fact, Jamil Sheriff and myself, yesterday, were doing just that when we were rehearsing for Friday. And what we were doing, we were playing, what are you playing on that? And Jamie said, why are you playing that? That shouldn't work. And then we started looking through that, and we started looking at the theory. But it was all driven by what we were hearing.
Yes, great, thank you. And we're very much looking forward to your concert on Friday. Would you like to tell us just a little bit about what you're going to be playing for us?
Yeah, we've got a selection of tunes. I can't remember them all offhand because, amazingly, for a half-hour programme, we're playing 7 tunes. It might possibly be 6 if we sort of get too excited on one tune. And ironically in that, we're playing 3 ballads. Although we're only playing 1 chorus of those ballads and they're quite open. It just seemed to fit in with the programme we're playing. They're all happy-ish tunes. I find jazz can be quite dour at times, and sort of people staring at their boots and going, and jazz is meant to be entertaining, as all music is. We are playing to an audience. So I think we're doing Alone Together, a tune called You're My Everything, Round Midnight, a sort of bluesy type tune called Elvinish, but in 3, sort of bluesy, not quite. But we had great fun rehearsing it yesterday, and it was, I think, a half-an-hour programme, and it was 4 hours later, I walked out.
Great. Well, I think a little bit of uplifting, happy jazz is just what we need at the moment.
Hopefully,
so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.